afternoon and welcome. Thank you for joining us today. Next week, as you know, is the UN General Assembly, so it gets very busy in this part of town, so thanks for taking some time to join us. I'm Margaret Besheer. I am a former journalist, and I covered the United Nations and the Middle East for many, many years. And today we are hoping to have a meaningful conversation about one of the root causes of regional instability in the Middle East, which is the erosion of trust between people and their governments. From Lebanon's economic collapse and institutional paralysis to Iraq's struggle with sectarian governance, Syria's complex transition to post-war reconstruction, and similar challenges across the region, we have repeatedly witnessed how quickly the social contract can unravel when legitimacy is lost. This breakdown creates a debilitating cycle. Weakened institutions that fail to deliver security and basic services, leaving corruption to flourish in the absence of accountability, and citizens increasingly turning to alternative sources of authority, whether tribal, religious, or armed groups, further undermining state capacity and national unity. So today we'll examine the root causes of the problem, propose some solutions, and look ahead to the future. It's ambitious to do this topic in just 1 hour, but we're going to try. And as we go along, please jot down a few questions you might like to ask the panel during the Q&A. So I'm going to get right to it and introduce to you our stellar panel today. It's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Tania Haddad, an associate professor of public administration and the interim chair of the Department of Political Studies and Public Administration at AUB, as well as the director of the Global Engagement Initiative, as we heard. Tania is widely recognized for her scholarship on civil society, nonprofit governance, and citizenship in Lebanon and the wider Arab world. Her research examines how sectarian welfare networks, NGOs, and volunteer initiatives influence state-society relations, and how citizens, especially young people, negotiate belonging, accountability, and public participation in the context of weak or fragmented states. Welcome, Tania. Dr. Khaldoun AbouAssi joins us from my alma mater, the American University in Washington, D.C., where he is a professor of public administration and policy in the School of Public Administration. However, Khaldoun's intellectual journey began at AUB, where he earned both his bachelor's and master's degrees in public administration from the Department of Political Studies and Public Administration. Khaldoun told me that his time at AUB, including his collaboration with the late public administration scholar Randa Antoun, helped shape his academic trajectory and professional identity. Welcome, Khaldoun.
Thank you.
And finally, Dr. Simon Neaime is professor of economics and chair of the Department of Economics at AUB. He is also the chair of the university's President's Council of Economic Advisors, advising the president and the university during Lebanon's recent overlapping crises. As an expert on emerging and Middle East North Africa economies, Simon has held senior economist positions with the UN Economic and Social Commission for Western Asia, also known as ESCWA, and the IMF and the European Commission. He has published extensively on Lebanon and other emerging markets' debt and financial crises, and recently contributed a chapter on Syria's transition towards democracy to the book Democratic Transition in the Arab World. Welcome, Simon.
Thank you.
So let's get to it. Simon, I'm going to ask you to kick us off. Oops.
Sorry,
We good? We okay?
Sorry.
That's okay. Simon, I'll ask you to kick us off with a bit of historical perspective. How did we get here? Why is trust so low? And what are the primary drivers of public distrust in government?
Sure. Thank you, Margaret, and thank you, Tania. I'm very happy to be part of this distinguished panel. I'll structure my answer in two parts. I will start with some general comments and then be more specific. Now, if you look at trust in public institutions, we know that trust is a cornerstone for political and economic stability, social cohesion, and sustainable development. Now, looking at the data, you see that trust is at historic lows, and that is mainly due to declining confidence in the region, in governments, and public institutions. What are the reasons? You have, first and foremost, corruption, the various economic, social, and financial crises that have hit the region, governance failures, conflict, wars, social fragmentation, and colonial legacies. So it's not really all handmade, current, but we have something that has been coming since a while ago. If you look at the states that have emerged from colonial rule, they have had governance systems that were after maintaining control rather than promote inclusivity and accountability. In several cases, the post-independence elite perpetuated authoritarian governance traditions, clientelism, patronage politics, crony capitalism, coupled with corruption and sectarianism, prioritizing regime stability over participatory politics. Those legacies somehow maintained stability more or less in the region, but then the problem was that they undermined the development of meritocratic institutions, they weakened public administration, eroded the perception of fairness and trust, and laid the foundation for weak state-society relations. And here I'm talking about those Middle East countries that did not experience conflict and war. In Syria, Lebanon, Iraq, Yemen, you see that the situation is different there. Those conflicts have decimated institutional capacity and further alienated citizens from the state and have reinforced the belief that state institutions cannot even safeguard the public or their interest. The consequence is to have in place fragile states prone to overlapping crises. Now, to be a little bit more specific, you see that economic crises amplify grievances. Severe crises like the one we experienced in Lebanon since 2019. We had the currency, banking, public debt, and unemployment overlapping crises that have unfolded since 2019. And there, citizens felt that the state had totally failed its basic duties. And the collapse in 2019 and 2019 and onward is a clear example where economic collapse became a focal point of mass protest. Adding to that, the fact that trust in Lebanon's government was hardly hit after the political corruption decimated the lifetime savings of a whole nation. 2, corruption converts poor public goods delivery into moral outrage. When public resources are captured by elites through patronage, crony capitalism, monopolies, ordinary citizens interpret poor service delivery as the result of illicit diversion. And that perception also destroys trust. We have also clientelist and sectarian allocation that undermines trust as well, where jobs, contracts, subsidies are distributed through networks and not through transparent rules. And citizens who are excluded perceive the state as partial, lowering compliance and civic trust and increasing disengagement. Failed reforms is also another problem, where attempts at reform that either cut subsidies without protection or that preserve state monopolies while asking citizens to tighten belts through austerity measures reinforce the view that reform favors elites, and that would fuel protest and political instability. In short, economic collapse and corruption in the Middle East have eroded the state's legitimacy, changing its narrative from protector/provider to extractor/partial. And that narrative is rarely would be reversed without credible and visible institutional change. They also led, in some instances, to the rise of parallel governance systems whereby militias, tribes, and sects took over the role of the states. Thank you.
Thanks. I'll take it back. So that's a lot of drivers of killing trust, eroding trust. So Khaldoun, talk to us. Trust is a very complicated concept. So talk to us a bit about some of the dimensions of it.
Okay, well, good morning everyone, and it's my pleasure to be here today on this panel and to be back at AUB. So first to be fair to the region and to the world, we are seeing a decline in trust worldwide. So it's not only in the MENA region, the situation there is much, much worse. But if we look here in the US or in other countries, even more democratic countries, we are seeing a decline in trust in institutions. So when we're talking about trust, it is really important to understand that conceptually, trust is hard to define or to capture. And therefore, if it is hard to define or to capture as a concept, thinking about the erosion of trust, rebuilding trust or building trust is not simple or straightforward. So I'm putting on my teacher hat, giving a brief lecture about the different concepts of trust. So first, trust can be what we call affective trust. And this is really based on emotions and bonds. It's the personal relations, the feeling of care and empathy. It develops through the shared experiences, but the personal connections. So I trust Tania just because we are friends. So that is really different from the other form of trust, which is cognitive trust that is based on rational assessment and evidence of reliability, competence, integrity. It develops when people perceive that an organization, institution, individual is capable, consistent, predictable, able to deliver or achieve results. I trust Tania because she has a good track record in terms of performance, not only because she is my friend, but because of her record. So these are two concepts, two different concepts of trust. Also, there is the interpersonal trust. This is the trust that we have with individuals, and then we have, opposite to that or similar to that, the institutional trust, which means the confidence in institutions such as governments, NGOs, the media, and so on. So these are two different concepts of trust as well. Then we have what some people say or talk about social trust or generalized trust. There are some of us who trust people regardless who they are. That's it. We trust. We trust others, regardless if I know them, if they are my friends, if they are competent, if they are able to deliver the results or not. So these are different concepts of trust that makes, again, understanding trust a little bit tricky, building trust a little bit hard. The challenge is that all of these different forms of trust or concepts of trust, the interpersonal, the institutional, think about, I trust an institution, but I don't trust the individuals working in that institution. Maybe I trust the government, but I don't trust any other politicians. So all of these feed and breed from each other. When institutions fail, social trust might weaken. When social cohesion fractures, trust in institutions would collapse. So the dynamic of this dynamic makes building trust, particularly in the Middle East, because we know how tightly we are connected socially, make it a little bit difficult.
So that brings us to the social contract. Tania, what happens to the social fabric when citizens feel excluded and begin to expect failure from their state institutions?
Good afternoon, everyone. It's a real pleasure to be here. So whenever we're talking about the exclusion of citizens mainly, across the Middle East and North Africa, exclusion is not a side issue. It is the main driver for me for the region's trust crisis. So whenever we look at the surveys, for example, at the Arab Barometer Wave 8 in 2023-2024, only 7% of the Lebanese said that they trust their government. In Morocco, 33% trust their government. In Lebanon, 76% do not trust the government at all. So these are trends where we see that People do not trust their governments. In Tunisia, and also 23, 24, trust in the parliament is around 9 to 10%. So people no longer believe that the government decisions reflect their interest. No, it's not only because of corruption or poor policy outcomes, but because they are shut out from the political community. Citizens are excluded from participation due to restriction, sectarian patronage, bureaucracy, but citizens are not here. Citizens are not part of it. They see that ministers are passing the laws, parliaments are rubber stamping the laws, civil society is absent. Government is imposed on them and not something that they call. All of this is destroying the social contract. Social contract is what? It's in a way an agreement between the people and the government, whereby I give you legitimacy, in return I expect fairness and the voice. But whenever we reduce citizenship to a passport or clientelist link, trust is collapsed. Whenever I see it, I see four main drivers of why we are seeing this exclusion. First of all, it's perceived illegitimacy. So people are doubting the motives of the government in general. So is the government doing the right thing? Is my voice being heard? This is the big question mark. Reform. How do they see reform? Whenever we're introducing reform, usually because they are excluded, they see reform as an elite bargain and not a collective solution. It's undermining the vertical trust and the horizontal trust. People don't trust each other anymore because of this issue that, in a way or another, it's a wasta thing, it's a clientelistic thing. It's not my voice that is being heard in the government. For example, I'll give you an example. In Lebanon, we had the economic reform post-2019. 82% of the people say that they saw that corruption is still present. Was that reform based on what the citizens want? No. So this is where we see it. The second thing is the weak civic network. So the more, the second thing is? Yes, the weak civic networks. The network between civil society, so yeah, so can you hear me now? Okay. So there's a shrinking of civic space. We're seeing a lot of shrinking civic space. Laws are being passed whereby they are restricting NGOs, restricting the civil society sector. In a way, so people do not see that their voices are there. They don't see that whatever they are saying, they are not participating in the civil life. This civic life, this is leading to the withdrawal. People are withdrawing from civic society and civic space. Where are they seeing? Where they are leaving, we see them leaving. In a way, 76% in Lebanon do not trust, are not interested in politics. 60% they want to migrate. In Jordan, 42% want to migrate. So all of these are in a way that people are not trusting each other, because if I want to reach the government, it's through the clientelistic networks. My voice is not being heard. I want to leave. The voice of institutions also. So in a way, there's a cross.
Sorry, it's okay, just hold it near you.
So there's a cross-cutting theme whenever we're doing research on this, is that the least trusted institutions are the parliament versus the ones that are being highly trusted is the army. So this is a big question mark. Why do people do not trust the parliament where this should be their voice versus the order one where this is in a way that the organizations are the ones who are providing the order, they are being trusted. Lebanon trust in the armed forces is 85% versus the trust in the parliament is 9%. So these are the things that are leading to the exclusion. Exclusion is leading to illegitimacy. Shrinking civic space is leading to weakening the collective skills. People are leaving. So we need to rework on the social contract. I'll stop here.
I'll just ask you one quick follow-up, Tania. In your data, is there any one country in the Middle East and North Africa where the trust numbers were high? And which country was it? And is trust directly linked to performance then? Like, is that country performing better?
The data I'm relying is on the Arab Barometer. So it's in a way they have it by waves. So every year they have different waves. So I'll send you the name. There are lots of, especially, so if you see, if I remember right, Kuwait, they have a very big trust in the government, versus Lebanon is the least one. But they differ based on the waves that are being presented. But I'm not sure about the exact numbers, but I was looking more about the trust issue, especially in the parliament versus other organizations.
So let's try and talk a little bit about some solutions. Khaldoun, how is trust reestablished, and how can governments in the region demonstrate credibility and transparency in ways that resonate with their citizens?
So before I answer your question, just to elaborate on what Tania said, and it's so the trust in the army is not limited to the Middle East. If you look at across the world, the army is the most trusted institution worldwide compared to other institutions, including NGOs. Yeah. So the NGOs are trusted more than the private sector or the government, but they are the army, regardless where you are, they are the most trusted. And this could go back to what I mentioned before in terms of how we understand trust. I trust the army because of the symbolism of the army in terms of like these are the defenders of the country, but also I trust the army because I believe in their competence and their ability to defend the country. That might not be the case when we're talking about politicians. I don't like them. Yeah, we don't. We definitely there's more research to be done on that. And you did ask which countries in the Middle East could have higher trust than Lebanon. Tania is right. The Gulf Arab countries, the governments in the Gulf Arab countries, there's more trust in the institutions because people believe that they are able to deliver the services that they promised them, right? And this brings me back to your question. So what should we do? In my opinion, the first thing that we need to start with is building institutions. So I think Simon said that because of the history in the Middle East, we don't have strong institutions, and more important, we started to see parallel institutions. That starts with militias, but also it starts with, or it goes to NGOs that for such a long period of time, they took over the role of government or governmental institutions in providing services. But also, take the example of Lebanon, when the country tried to rebuild itself in the 1990s and so on, international organizations created a parallel public administration through contractors, consultants, and so on. So we were not building the institutions. So we need to build institutions. We need to build the governmental institutions or the public institutions. That is the first thing that we need to do. The second thing is what Tania talked about, which is the social contract, which is some kind of agreement, a psychological agreement. It's not a written agreement between citizens and the government. I'm expecting you as my government to deliver X, Y, and Z. In return, you have the legitimacy that I am going to renew through elections. In many countries in the region, there isn't a real social contract. Take the example of Lebanon. In Lebanon, many politicians talk about social contract, but the way they understand social contract is the Taif agreement. The Taif agreement is not a social contract. It is a deal between different confessional sectarian groups to divide and share power among themselves. And then the leaders or the elites of these different groups will decide who gets what within their communities or among their constituents. So we need to rebuild, or we need to come up with a social contract. If you take a comparative example would be the situation in Saudi Arabia, where a social contract is being rewritten. So we know the situation in Saudi Arabia, how it used to be, that the government would provide services, would help or support their citizens, and in return the citizens would be happy and satisfied. Nowadays, the government, and I'm not judging the country or the leadership in Saudi Arabia, and it is an experience in the make. So the government is trying to redefine the social contract by telling its citizens, well, you need to be part of this social contract. We want to include you. Maybe we're not going to include you by hosting or holding elections next year, but we want to include you by allowing you or giving you the chance to be part of the production process. Build your capacity, build your knowledge, build your education. So all of these are important examples of what we need to do, build institutions and refigure or draft or redefine a new social contract.
So Simon, why don't you talk to us about the economic reforms that are needed to rebuild trust and restore that social contract, and go beyond Lebanon. I know it's so tempting to stay in Lebanon, especially on the economic front, but we'll spread out.
Thank you, Khaldoun and Tania. Without institutions, we as economists have nothing to say. Without the social contract also. But one way to get around those problems as economists, we make strong assumptions sometimes and move forward. Basically, the main idea here is we cannot have economic reforms without a fair social contract in place and without institutions, as Khaldoun mentioned at the time. Even going back to the Washington consensus of the 80s and 90s, even back then, the consensus, IMF, World Bank type policies, they failed to achieve stability, economic stability, because they had neglected the institutional and social aspect of reforms. Back then, the IMF used to have one macroeconomic model that fits all crises without looking at the institutional or the social aspects. That has changed recently, and you see that the IMF is now requiring or requesting some reforms as prerequisites before any macroeconomic model can be implemented. The list is long for Lebanon. They had the same thing in Jordan, Tunisia. Also, the European Union had a program, the macroeconomic and financial assistance program under the umbrella of the IMF. No more capital to be channeled into countries without having the social contract and the institutional reforms in place. So basically what we need to rebuild trust, we need sequenced economic reforms that would pair fiscal stabilization and discipline with visible social protection and pre-employment policies. To control the budget deficits and the current accounts, what do we need to do? Make tax collection, decrease tax evasion, have a progressive taxation system in place, make VAT a fairer type of raise taxes, tax the high incomes and property. All of these measures would reduce inequality. On the expenditure side, and as we have mentioned already, eradicate corruption. With corruption, nothing can be done, and reduce the size of the public sector by eliminating ghost jobs. To be more specific, what is needed is civil service reform and meritocracy. So we need merit-based hiring in the public sector, transparent promotion, improve public service delivery, and reduce patronage. We need also a transparent public financial management with budgets being made public. In Lebanon and on several occasions, the government was spending money without even a budget. We need to have anti-corruption bodies, enforceable asset disclosure for all public servants, and a judiciary. The judiciary should be independent. When it comes to the labor market reforms should be there to link them to skills and jobs. Also, youth unemployment is very important. We need also financial inclusion and small and medium enterprise support, digital payments, microcredit, easier business registration, to give access to finance to even the poorest categories of the population. We also need a decentralized government, bring political decision making closer to citizens, shift service delivery and fiscal powers to local governments with citizens' oversight. That is also political inclusion. So what is needed is political inclusion, economic inclusion, and this is why trust can be reestablished. And I end it here. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you, Simon. So, Tania, back to you. Walk us through what a new social contract should look like.
It's a very difficult question. I'm going to be building based on what Khaldoun was talking about, that there is a need for a social contract, and what Simon was, in a way, guiding us through the reform of the government. I'm going to talk about the role of the citizens here. Citizens should have the major role whenever we're writing a new social contract. They are the major player here. The first thing is, in a way or another, we need to work on real participation, not only consultation. Give a space to the youth. Give them a place where they can raise their voice, where they can take decision. This could be in the local governments, in their municipalities, have a parallel, in a way, youth government, youth parliament, but we should provide a voice for the youth. Just to give you also an example about the numbers, in the Arab Barometer, and this is to my surprise, usually whenever we talk about volunteering in the Arab world, and this is something we've been studying for the last 20 years, volunteering is very low. Apparently nowadays, although trust is very low in the government, young people, they want to volunteer, they want to participate heavily in community volunteering. So we're seeing a rise where youth, they want to participate. This is something that we need to build on. We need to build on the civic skills and civic education of the youth. This is very important. Whenever we look at the studies that are focusing on civic education, especially in the MENA region, when we're talking about civic education in high school, mid-school, it's totally absent. Or it goes just to, in a way, memorizing a couple of words and just writing them for an exam. We need to go more than this. We need to build civic education, active citizenship. We need to tell the youth what they can do to raise their voice, to change. Political active citizens at the university level, at the school level, and at the community level. However, we need also to provide them with a safe and open space for organizing. Collective action is very important. However, if we don't have the safe space, they're not going to be able to participate. This is very important. We need to find networks in different Arab countries across divide. So the Arab countries internally they are divided. We need to find common ground for citizens, for the youth, and tell them, listen, you need to participate, you need to build a state. The government is providing you with a safe space. Find common ground and start building your country. Partnership with the state. So in a way or another, even if the government is absent, like in Lebanon, or failing, or failed, or weak, youth should understand that they need to be part of, and citizens need to be part of this government. They should co-produce. They should be part in taking the decisions. It's not like decisions are taken behind closed doors. No, we're listening to your voices. Most also, I'll end here, is diversify resources. Provide resources for the citizens in social entrepreneurship. Tell them to start working. Work with the diaspora. Don't only rely on one resource or the other. Provide them with places where they can really provide for the government or work with the government to build their societies.
So I'm going to ask you, what are the next steps then? What are your policy recommendations? Simon, you talked about sort of long-term economic reform, but are there short-term economic measures, for instance, that could rebuild institutional trust?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, in the short term, especially in the crisis-stricken countries in the Middle East, I mean, they need really targeted reforms and to be introduced swiftly. One of them could be, cash transfers programs. to protect the poor from the economic crisis, price shocks, exchange rates, wars. One good example would be what happened in Jordan during COVID, the Takaful program, giving money directly to the poor. Restore and guarantee the purchasing power of public wages and pension payments. 6 years after the crisis in Lebanon, and the people, the public servants, do not have have lost 99% of their purchasing power. We also need quick improvements in vital public services, water, electricity. That's also still inexistent in Lebanon. Healthcare. Subsidies, move subsidies from maybe fuel and energy to the basket of food baskets, to healthcare, education. Also maybe target the youth. Unemployment rates in the region are 40% high, very high. Help SMEs, provide small grants, credits to SMEs, in job-intensive sectors. Youth unemployment is high, women unemployment is high in the region. Banking and financial accountability, restructure the banking system, consolidate the banking system. In Lebanon, the savings have been lost, the banking system is not operational anymore. Again, the IMF is requiring some reforms there. I don't know if we can have a banking system that is running. How can you have credit to the private sector, investment in the economy without an operational banking system? Transparency is also very important. So all of these measures need to be introduced swiftly before having long-term macroeconomic models operating properly in the region.
Khaldoun, what are the most practical first steps that Arab governments can take to begin restoring legitimacy in the eyes of their people?
Well, it's not easy, and I'm not sure if the government is the one that should take the first step. Maybe everyone should take a step. And to be clear, the rebuilding trust is not going to happen overnight. It's a long process. And since I talked about the redefining the social contract, I'm not sure if it is going to be that practical, because it takes two sides. It takes the government, it takes the citizens. I'm not really sure that citizens across the Middle East are willing to say, "Oh, we're going to show up to the elections and vote, or we're going to pay our taxes, or we're not going to bribe someone, or we're not going to be involved in corrupt practices." So it's not going to be easy. But also keep in mind that the region continues to struggle with crises and turbulence, war after war, economic crisis after economic crisis, and that's why, honestly, I heard yesterday that 22% of the youth in Lebanon have thought of committing suicide. So that is extremely high. Even during the economic crisis in 2019, I think it was 12%. So what do you expect from people who are facing these problems to do? Do you expect them to have trust in institutions or politicians? But since we come from education institutions, and something that we have control over is probably start with education. Maybe we have, I took a course about civic education when I was in high school. I talked about the history of Lebanon, I talked about democracy, we learned about democracy, about solidarity, about engagement. All of these are great concepts, but how do we translate all of that into practice? So my background is public administration. We need good public administration programs across the regions, or public policy, public administration programs. So it's education, and then allow more and more connections between students and the government. So more internships in different government agencies would be a really good start. And Tania, since you are the chair of the political studies and public administration department, you have major responsibility here to make sure that you invest in public administration and public policy education, especially at EUB. And since the secretary of the board is also in the room, please.
So, segueing over to you, Tania, then, how can citizens, especially the young people, be more engaged in creating a renewed sense of legitimacy and stable statehood?
Actually, to regain trust, it's not one way. It's a top-down approach and a bottom-up approach. We need to work together. The government has a certain role to play, but citizens have a role to play. Educational institutions have a major role to play. Civil society organizations have a major role to play. And this is where I want to tackle a little bit the role of civil society. Civil society is mainly a bridge between the citizens in their home and the government. We need to provide a space for civil society organization to work. We need to provide communication between the citizens and the government through civil society organization. We need to stop a little bit the cooptation that the government is trying to do for civil society organization. In a way or another, the governments are trying to partner with NGOs and civil society for service delivery, but stop their ability to speak out. The idea of NGOization, whereby NGOs are turned into only service delivery, we need to move beyond that. Organizations should be more independent, they should work on influencing, they should bring the youth to this space in a way to be watchdogs over the government, to participate in the policy making of the government, and at the same time they are provided with the safe space to discuss. We need to plug in citizens' voice. So this is where the role of the government should also be. Diversify the resources of civil society organizations, not only donor-driven. We need to work on civil society organization in a way that they can decide on their own programs, not only those programs that are coming from donors. We need to work on this also building. We need to provide, to make sure that the citizens feel that they have local ownership when it comes to the mandate of society organizations. In a way, I know that if I want to be a watchdog over the government, if I want to participate, if I want to raise my voice, there are certain civil society organizations that will help me do that. And this is will create a credibility between the citizens and the people and the government.
I want to keep us on track so that we can get to your questions. So I'll just ask one final question to each of you. If you could just be brief in your answer, what are the risks of failing to restore trust?
Well, they could be catastrophic. I mean, at least from my economic perspective, we have seen, capital flights, brain drain, increases in suicidal rates, reduced foreign investment, expansion of shadow economies, cash economies in foreign sectors, black markets. This is what's happening in Lebanon, where one of those militias took over the role of the government. Poverty, income inequality, and if Lebanon is moved to the blacklist, that is even worse. I mean, we can no longer make even transfers to Lebanon or from Lebanon. Youth and female unemployment. So the consequences could be catastrophic, but we hope for some solutions inside so that we move back to put Lebanon on track. Thank you.
If we from one side, if we don't rebuild trust or try to rebuild the trust, brain drainage is going to continue to be high. The scary part is the youth. The 22% that I mentioned in terms of the youth thinking about suicide is going to continue to increase. Not only in Lebanon, take other countries such as Syria or Yemen or Sudan. So that is a huge risk. On the other side, history showed us that people are resilient. They can figure a way. They might not be happy, not satisfied. They will continue to find a way. Some glimpse of hope somewhere.
I don't like the word resilient. This is something that they always say that we're resilient, we're not resilient. I don't want to be resilient, I want a trust between me and my government. Sorry, Khaldoun. But I think from my research, from my point of view, people or the citizens will turn into free riders. They're not going to be participating in the civic life. They're going to be a big brain drain in the region, and this is also going to affect the economy of the state and how the state is functioning. And one issue that we also need to be careful about is the regional spillover. So people will be leaving from one country to another, migration will increase, and then there will also be more and more problems that we will have to face.
Stark. All right, well, I want to turn it over to you now. We have about 10 minutes for questions. I'm going to give this microphone to Amanda.
Maybe I'll use the other one that's
Do you-
not great.
Is it working better?
No, but
This one's not good either.
it's fine.
Okay, and if you could just state your name and your affiliation as we come around. Thank you.
Does anyone have any questions?
Don't be
Yes.
shy.
Here we go. Yeah. Hi, my name is Rania Turk. I don't come from any of this background. I work in advancement, but I spent 2 months in Beirut this summer, and I was I admit, in all naivete, hoping to see some change with the new government. And I saw nothing. I saw we went backwards. And there was a sense of disappointment, of course. My question to you is, of all the things that you spoke about and that will lead us to reform, that will lead us to a better Lebanon in particular, do you know of anything that's already in place in the pipeline, anything that's already happening with the new government? Are they making you aware or making the public aware of any good things that are going to be happening, or at least that they are working on?
I'll answer that. So just to give you actually there are certain signs of change. But as Khaldoun said, it's going to take a long process. I'll give you a couple of examples. So we have the UMSAR, so the Ministry of Reform, governance reforms, and I think Khaldoun worked before with them. So now they are working on the biggest reform, administrative reform since Fuad Shah. But this is a long process. It's not something that we will be able to see from one day to another. Judicial independence, this is something we're seeing. So more and more we're seeing judicial independence in the state, so the judicial sector is capable of taking decisions without any political interference. And for us, this is very big. But change is going to be very gradual, it's going to be very small. But from our side, we're seeing certain change.
Thanks, Tania. I would also like to add something very important. I mean, in Lebanon, unfortunately, if we tend to forget that we have a militia that took over the role of the state completely and that created its own army. I think as soon as that problem is resolved, you will see that reforms and economic reforms, everything else will be moving forward and very fast. But that problem needs to be tackled first before we can really have tangible reforms and before we can feel those reforms. I think we already we are on the right track, but we need to be a bit patient so that that problem, the main problem there, is resolved, and then we can see things moving forward. You want to say something?
No? Okay. Would someone else like to ask a question?
Thank you. Hi, my name is Elisa Hassan. Thank you for the insightful remarks. I was going to ask a similar question about the new government and whether it is fostering trust or it's leading to further divide and polarization in the society. So I wanted to ask you, do you feel like it's realistic that it will be removed, like the militia, as you called it, or a different perspective in society? And how do you actually speak to the youth or the other differing point of view in the society? Because at the end of the day, they do make up a big part of society. So how within this reform and change you include all of the parties in the country, and where do we start, and just your perspective in general on this. Thank you.
Who'd like that?
Well, we hope so. We hope to resolve that, the main issue, to have, again, a functional government in place, an army, a Lebanese army also in place. So these are the basics. You cannot really talk about youth unemployment, women participation, fair elections, and so on, with that anomaly in place. So we hope that that main problem is first resolved, and then we can start talking about how to restructure the banking system, how to restructure the economy, what reforms are needed, how Tania and Khaldoun would suggest to improve public administration, to improve elections, have fair elections, etc. But before all of that can be put in motion, we need a permanent solution for that other problem which is still there, unfortunately.
Just continue with this functioning government. What does it mean, a functioning government? This is also something that we need to ask ourselves. So we'll be able to see a fully functioning government, a non-failed or failing state, good governance. This is something that will take a long time. It's not something that we can turn the page, we can fix the system, and everything will be okay. However, there are certain signs. How do we find that? Whenever I'm in the classroom, I always tell the students, listen, we all have the same problems. We don't have electricity. We're paying 2 bills of electricity. We don't have water. We don't have infrastructure. Let's start by doing this. Let's start by participating. I ask them, why do you vote for this person or that person? The answer would be because I know them, because I know their neighbor, because they came to visit my uncle. This is how people are voting or are choosing the members of the parliament or the members of the local governance or the municipalities. Let's start by this. Let's start by demanding accountability, certain accountability. Let's start by educating people who should they vote for and how to hold them accountable. Once we do that, then we will be able to really have a functioning or a parliament that we can hold accountable. So we need to find a common ground between everyone, and we all have the same problems.
So your second part of the question is the critical one, and actually it's the scary one. Yeah, we can maybe at one point in time things will be resolved. A group will be disarmed. We can strengthen the army. We can start to rebuild the government. But what happens? How can we rebuild the social fabric, and how we can rebuild the social trust among the Lebanese? And this is really, really, really going to be hard. I think the big mistake that all the Lebanese did after the end of the civil war, and we are seeing the same in Iraq, probably we will see it in Yemen and then in Sudan, is that we did not talk about the civil war. We did not talk about killing each other. We did not resolve these issues. So all of this is still there. And whatever has been happening over the years have added to that. We should learn from the experiences of other countries that went through the same situation. South Africa, as an example, how they talked about forgiving, working with each other, resolving their conflict. I can give you just one simple example from my small village in Mount Lebanon. I don't know if anyone knows Nasser Shuf, where there were massacres between you are from?
I'm from there.
Oh, you are? Oh, small word. But I'm sure you were not born when that happened, or even after the. So there were massacres between the Jews and the Christians, and the president came, and the president of the republic came, and they did some reconciliation, right? It was a festival. But all of this did not really work. The only thing that worked were people were playing a game together. They were playing chess. One Druze and one Christian, and they started playing a game, and they started talking to each other, and they found out, oh, you really look like me. You're not different than me, that we share the same problems.
Yeah.
So maybe going to the very basics, to the human level, that would be a good start. Having said that, I think this is going to be extremely extreme.
Just to add a small, on a more optimistic note, that, at the end of the day, you see that Lebanon, and despite the series of overlapping crises, wars that have been unfolding since 2019, we managed in May to hold municipal elections. That is really a signal that really tells us that at the end of the day, citizens, when they are drawn back into political life, they will assume their role and participate. So what we need is some space, decrease conflicts, have a functional government in place, and you will see things moving forward and very fast.
Okay. I think we have time for one more or two more. We'll give you, okay,
Let's
go ahead.
do two more.
We do?
We'll start here and then go over there. Hold on. There you go.
Do you want to take this one?
Just
I don't
be
think
loud.
I need one.
Okay. Well, actually for the webcast, we
Oh.
need it. Yeah.
Okay,
Do you want to take this one?
I was pushing on the wrong button. That's me. Sorry. Go. Thank you.
Hi, how are you? Abbas Khalifu. Actually, my question is also to Dr. Khaldoun, something Dr. Khaldoun and Dr. Tania both mentioned when we were comparing building trust between the government and the people, and we give examples of the Gulf versus what's happening in Lebanon. At the same time, I feel that there is a difference between governance systems between the Gulf and Lebanon, or when I say Lebanon, I mean like Lebanon, Syria, and Iraq. There is a very big difference between the social fabric of both countries, the dynamic of social fabric of both countries, and the governance systems of both countries. For example, in Lebanon, we have a parliamentary system, in other Gulf countries, borderline authoritarian systems. How would these two factors play a role when we talk about building trust between people and governments?
Okay, so this relates to what kind of social contract you have in a country. And there are countries where the social contract is we have a contract. I will give you services, you give me your legitimacy. You don't vote, but that's the legitimacy. So that was probably the case in many countries, especially in the Arab Gulf, where it is, I provide you with the services. I'm not going to hold elections. You're going to support my regime regardless. But we're seeing that this kind of social contract is being redefined. Is it being redefined in the same way that a social contract is applicable in Lebanon or any other country, including the US? No, the social contract really should reflect the social setting or situation where the different demographic heterogeneity of the country should be factored in. And to be clear, I'm not sure that the social contract for Lebanon was working or is working. Maybe another kind of social contract that is similar to other countries might be more productive in terms of providing the Lebanese with what they need. But maybe Tania has a different.
No, I just want to add something about Lebanon. Actually, we have a social contract, but we're not really applying it. We have a constitution, we have a Taif agreement, but we're not applying it. It's a clientelistic, it's a wasta society. If we take the constitution and we apply it, we're going to have a functioning social contract, we're going to have a trust between the government and the citizen, and we're going to have a functioning state. Is it something that is very easy to do? This is the big question mark. This is where we need to work on citizenship.
Hi, Mark Woodcock, and I just wondered if you saw a role for nation-level myths or shared histories, heroes whether sports or music or film or historical traditions as a factor in creating this resident trust.
Good question. You have
Khaldoun?
the mic. You have it.
You have the mic.
Actually, we need to create maybe a common history. A common history is something very important. It creates a social contract. It's an emotional thing, and this is where we have a common history, whether it is sports, whether it is culture, whether it is music. This will help. You have the culture is a major important role, and so when we teach citizenship, we stress a lot on cultural projects. Work on cultural projects, you're gonna find a common ground, and then you're gonna start. Sometimes we work with food, so we tell them bring the food from your different country, from your different villages, bring them on the table, and let's start discussion. Sometimes bring paintings, bring pictures from your villages, put them on the table, and then we start the discussion. This is something very important, and we use whenever we're building the social cohesion.
I think probably the only thing that specifically in the case of Lebanon, the only thing that the Lebanese agree on is Fayrouz. And if we can recreate Fayrouz forever, then that would be great. I'm not sure that they would agree on anything else. When it comes to sports, the Lebanese are divided. There is a team for the Christians, and there are other teams for the Muslim, and the Shia and the Sunni. Maybe Fayrouz and maybe the hummus. They agree that the hummus is Lebanese. But yes, these are ways to try to bring people together. But because of the history, probably it's hard to get there. So maybe moving forward, building on the culture, on arts, on food, these would be good venues forward.
I'll leave it there. Kabul.
Sorry, we have one right here.
Okay, we'll take one last question.
Thank you all. I'm Mohammed Bazi. I teach at NYU. Thank you for this, and this is to Tania and Khaldoun. You made excellent points about the social contract. I think one of the things that worries me is there's a history in Lebanon of that the social contract only ever gets changed or amended in times of violence, and often extreme violence. I mean, just off the top of my head, I'm thinking about the Civil War period, the assassination of Hariri in 2005, Hezbollah-Israel War 2006, Hezbollah taking over West Beirut in 2008, up until last year's war. Is there a way to conceive, is there a way to think socially, a way so that people don't fall into the trap or the fear that the social contract is only ever going to change in times of extreme duress? And I think we see it a little bit now, and Hezbollah and its constituency thinking that because, and it's not quite, disarmament isn't exactly changing of the social contract, but it's something close, and it's being portrayed as, again, a period of extreme violence may follow.
So I'm not going to answer your question. I will leave it to Tania. But to me, this is not. We're not talking about a social contract. This is a deal between the Lebanese, the different Lebanese confessional groups, how to divide and share government. This is an agreement between elites. This is not an agreement. This is not a social contract that binds me as a citizen with my government, because there's this deal between them, and then there's a deal between me and my religious leaders and the elites of my religious community. Until we have a real social contract, which Tania said does exist in the Constitution, this is a general framework that needs to be translated into specifics. Until we have that kind of social contract, this is going to continue to be the deal. And such deals, you're right, they're going to happen only when there's bloodshed.
I would add one more thing. We need to remove the gatekeepers that are stopping me as a citizen from reaching the government. Once we do that, then we might be able to build a social contract. How we're going to be able to do that? There is always the idea we fear the other. There is always, and this is something that you raised, Muhammad, in a way that there is always the fear that there can be a war. There is always the fear that we don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. We need to stop this vicious circle. We need to stop those gatekeepers that are preventing me from reaching the services from the government. If I need to get a service from the government, I need to go through the WhatsApp, through those channels. Once we remove those gatekeepers, once we stop this fear from the other, then we might be able to do that. How? This is a long process, and we need to stop this idea of fear maybe, and this is where I see it from my personal research, through building this citizenship, through building an active citizen, and finding the common ground between everyone.
Okay. Did you have one question? I feel bad to.
It's okay.
You sure?
I don't have time, but I have a question.
We'll take one and
Go ahead,
finish,
go
and then
ahead.
we'll close it. Wait, get to the mic.
It's okay.
Oh, okay. Go ahead.
Very quick. I hear from you talking about like two types of trust, which is like authoritative trust based on the fear and the relational trust. And having your background in consideration, how do you think, and now that we are witnessing a new wave of academics entering the parliament with, I don't know to what extent they have this political training, how do you see the role of academics in shifting the balance between this authoritative trust and the relational trust that we are talking in a way without giving this image that its reforms are elite-shaped reforms?
Give the mic.
Question for you.
That's a very difficult question to answer, but you need, in a way or another, you need to start with a certain trust. So the government that is there, it is being trusted by the people. But you need to include the people in your decision making. So in a way, don't take those decisions behind closed door and tell them we are taking those decisions in order to really help you. We need to include the people. And this is actually what many ministries are doing. They are doing consultations, so they're going and doing consultations with the syndicates, they're doing consultations with the universities, they're doing consultations with the municipalities in order to put the reform agendas. They're not really working under closed doors, and they are taking the decisions. This is very important. And I'll give you also the example of UNSRI. This is what they're doing. They're doing the consultations on the ground. It's going to take lots of time, but you need to be inclusive. You need to include everyone.
So since you mentioned academics, and I'm unfortunately one of them, even in my class, I have to listen to my students. Like, I know more than them, but still, they know what they need. They're having a bad day. They're not willing to learn today. They want something else. So regardless where you are as an academic, if you are in parliament or in class, you should listen. Listen to the people that you are interacting with. You know more, but they know more about their own situation. So try, and I hope, I cannot judge the members of parliament in Lebanon, but I hope they are doing that. I hope they are bringing together their elite thinking, their big ideas, hopes, and then the practical applications of things. But at the same time, I don't allow my students to run the class, and I think the decision makers or the policy makers should also be able to translate whatever they learn into practical, applicable policies, not do whatever citizens want them to do just because of that, and more important, not to really give up their hopes, dreams, or agendas because of the political parties or powers that are in place.
All right, well, we're really out of time. I don't want the caterer to yell at me. So I just want to thank our fabulous panel, Tania, Khaldoun, Simon, for traveling here to be with us today, to give us these perspectives, and to thank you, our audience, for all of your questions. You can continue the conversation afterwards with them. A few final takeaways. about rebuilding trust. First of all, it's not just happening in the MENA region. It's a worldwide problem, as Khaldoun pointed out. And it goes beyond just technical reforms or external intervention. It demands a deeper understanding of how legitimacy is earned, how social unity can be fostered across different communities, and how institutions can be created to serve all citizens. And the risk of failure has catastrophic consequences. So that is something to chew on as we have lunch. And I will pass back to you, Amanda, to talk about AUB's GEI, if you want. Or I know Ada spoke a little at the top. But
Yeah, Ada gave you a good
Okay.
overview. I'm Amanda Fox. I'm the Director of
you want the good
Communications.
mic?
No, okay. Thank you all so much for being here for this great, lively conversation. Thank you to our amazing panelists, to Margaret for moderating, and I'm very grateful for our relationship, our partnership with American. We'll keep that going. Please check out the QR link and sign up for more events and follow us on social media to have more of these discussions. We have a yummy lunch. Introduce yourself to someone you don't know. Keep the conversation going. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you.